The following program is a production of Naleo TV.
Kona moon, shining so bright, smiling at you, right out of the sky.
Under the Kona Moon is brought to you in part by La'iopua 2020 and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Storytelling is a Hawaiian tradition that spans the centuries. Kawaiʻola News is dedicated to sharing the stories of the Hawaiian community. Go to kawaiʻola.news to hear oiwi from across the Pai'aina share their challenges and victories as they move the lahui forward. View bonus video stories and expanded photo coverage online. Explore Kawaiʻola's story archive sharing important moments in Hawaiian history. Visit and subscribe to kawaiʻola.news. News for the lahui.
Velina ke aloha ya o ko apau. Welcome to Under the Kona Moon. My name is Holeka Goro Inaba, and I'm your host for today's exciting filming of Under the Kona Moon. Today we are at Honokohawiki, Kona, and we are blessed to be with the Konanui Ohana to learn a little bit about the life and legacy of Uncle Jerry Konanui, a master mahi'ai. So aloha to you all, Konanui Ohana, and thank you so much for making your way here to Kona today. We have Auntie Gladys, daughter Nikki, and grandson Hayden, and we just, I think, should start off by hearing a little bit about Uncle Jerry's life. So Auntie Gladys, being that you knew him from young kid time, if you could share a little bit about Uncle Jerry's young times.
Jerry and I were born the same year, we're classmates. He was born in actually at Ola Hospital when they had the Plantation Hospital, but grew up mostly, partly in Kalapana, mostly in Opihikau, and then during his later school years, they built a house in Pahoa where they lived until his parents actually moved out and gave the house to Jerry and I. We both went to Pahoa High and Elementary from kindergarten to graduation. Then he joined the Army after graduation. I stayed in Hilo for a few years at Hilo College, then went to Manoa. He stayed only for one term of his military and moved back his last station was in Germany. And he moved back to Hilo, actually Pahoa, and went to Hawaii Community College and took electrical. And as soon as he graduated, he was recruited by Helco to work as an electrician. But he also had a background in electronics during his Army tour. So he was very comfortable working with electrical. And he worked for Helco for basically a little over 30 years. But his goal in life was to retire early, and just before reaching 55, he retired, and then he could do what he wanted, which involved many things, including kalo. Then he also got involved in ava, and one of his last big projects was to teach farmers who raised the taro, because there was so much taro and they had no idea what to do with it except to cook it and hopefully eat it, was to teach people to make their own boards and stones to do traditional kalo kui. Oh, and I did forget to mention his parents, Joseph Kepa Konanui and his mother Elizabeth Enriquez Konanui, were from Puna, and they were farmers from even before. Their parents were farmers, and they always raised taro from when he was born till after they retired. And he had 3 siblings, he's the oldest, a younger brother and 2 younger sisters. And I was very fortunate to be in a family that always worked together. The force that drove his family was his mother, Elizabeth, because, well, everybody called her Auntie E. And she was the one who organized our family in doing many, many projects, taro planting, taro harvesting. Then later on, because we raised taro, we also did a kulolo project. And every Christmas for about almost 10 years, everyone would get together for a whole weekend to make kulolo, and we did it more traditionally in a imu. It was a lot of work because the 3 younger nephews and cousins had to collect over 100 coconuts, clean it, grate it, squeeze it manually, until in the later years when it got a little more a larger project, then we were fortunate to have people who created machines that would mechanically grind the coconut and the taro. So we all grew up working together and doing that, raising taro, doing ranching. My father-in-law raised pigs. We had a brother-in-law that was a good fisherman, so we would have projects to come and clean fish because he would catch over 100 ahole in one net throw, and things like that. Then during his early career, he had this, after graduating and working, he started working, he had a dream that he woke up in a cold sweat and he realized that it was his duty to train his grandchildren and teach them about everything that they need to know to survive in the future. So he focused on taro, and that's how his taro journey began. He tried to meet as many kupuna that were still alive back then. This was in the 70s and 80s, and when we went from island to island following all the taro festivals that were really good back then. Ohana Taro Festival was one, Kauai had a good one, Oahu, and I remember, I forget the years, but Honoka would have a taro festival. And it was really good until towards the end it turned into more of a craft fair thing, and there were issues with the people who ran the festival. But I remember following him island to island, and eventually he was asked to be a speaker at many different organizations and festivals, and even the University of Hawaii. Another thing he got really involved in was the anti-GMO issue, that he and there was a good group of people who organized, and they convinced the county of Hawaii, which was the first island to actually ban GMO taro and coffee. And Maui followed. I think the last island and I'm not sure Oahu even tried to do it, but there were people on statewide who joined and did a protest and spoke to the legislature especially on the opening day of the legislature. And there was a really good event that I wish I had been there. They did a kui at the Capitol. So the whole rotunda was filled with people with boards and stones doing a kui. And they also had entertainment, people who did lomi to help those who were tired. And that's been a tradition now till just before the COVID. Hayden, we all went to participate. I didn't do a kui, but I was there just to represent Jerry, because at the last one he had already passed. So those are the things he did. But he believed in where taro is not the only thing people should raise. You need to be sustainable, so be diversified. Grow taro, bananas, sweet potato, ulu. Well, if you have the space, but if you don't, he knew people on Oahu who raise taro in pots. And it wouldn't be 10, 15 pounders, but 1 or 2 pounds is fine, because you can only eat, one of his favorite saying was you can only eat 1 spoon at a time. So size was not an issue, but quality is an issue. So one of his philosophies was to let farmers know, if you want to get a good price on your taro, if you're going to sell it commercially, make sure you raise good quality taro. Taro that's not full of holes or what we call loli or overripe taro, because sometimes they leave it in the land too long just to get the weight. But if they wait too long, then it starts to deteriorate, because taro is not annual, it's a perennial. It's an annual, sorry, and you need to harvest it when it's ready. You cannot wait past its maturity. And those are the things that he tried to instill in farmers, especially backyard farmers. Some would get so interested and very enthusiastic, but they don't realize it still involves a lot of physical work. And knowing your environment is another issue that he wanted to instill in people.
And I think he taught a lot of lessons, and we'll hear some of those come out from his haumana later in this segment as well. And at this time, I want to open it up to daughter Nikki, grandson Hayden, on just what your father and grandfather was like for you folks growing up, in the household, and who he was as a person.
I remember Dad as having many hobbies. I remember elementary, middle school, high school. Because I was the oldest, I got to go with him on a lot of things. So we did a lot of shoreline fishing back home, down Kalapana, Pihikau. Remember ranching with my families, going to family roundups in Waimea with our Ohana from there, and it's a big, like Mom said, it was a big Ohana thing. So my dad, his siblings, and all of us grandkids would all get together, load up in the trucks, trailers, go grab some wean-offs, spend a day with our Ohana in Waimea, come back home, take it to my papa's ranch, my grandfather's ranch, where my other uncle helped raise the animals and care for them. Grandfather ran the piggery, so when we finished school, we would go down to my grandfather's house, help maintain the pigs, feed the pigs, collect papayas from the surrounding papaya farms that my grandfather had built relationships with. And then I remember Dad always saying, okay, we have a plan. Like Mom said, my grandma would always have these family work days, so whenever there was holidays, it's like, oh, okay, where are we gonna go, what we're gonna do. I remember several years planting grass in a ranch, to going to my sister's in-laws' place in Pepe Hill and harvesting macnuts for the first time, and our family was like, that's not where we're from, and good experience, but I don't think we need to do that one again. It was really interesting. A lot of family work projects, you know, mango season comes on. The entire family, we have pakinis on top of pakinis full of mangoes. So we have the people who would sit there and clean the mangoes, the other ones who would cut, the other ones who would get the big pots ready for the sauces, and it's just a big Ohana gathering, time of us gathering together and, you know, practicing these traditions that they grew up with. A lot of working together with the Ohana, and then watching him later on, like when I was in high school, when he started really getting into the kalo. We went up to our farm one day with my classmates to go pick up foliage for decorations for May Day for the gym, and we pull up and there's my dad sitting in the middle of the taro field with his ukulele and singing away, and my friend's like, what's he doing? I'm like, he's communing with his plants and his friends, so then they grow good and big for us to have good food later on. And they're like, wow, that's interesting. And then for me, later going on into college, I was at the University of Hilo taking agriculture classes, and I remember my teachers, the professors asking, can your dad come in to do a workshop? I'm like, really? Like, I thought I was supposed to be learning from you, because it was funny because the stuff that he came to talk about was like everyday things to me. And I'm like, okay, yeah. But then my classmates were like really amazed because they've never had that experience before. So that was very interesting and for me to see. And even finishing up at Manoa in the College of Agriculture, I know a lot of my professors and the researchers there worked alongside with him. So it was really fun that they're like, oh, you're so-and-so's daughter. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I didn't really have a name for myself. But it was really good, and I felt really honored to be able to say, yep, that's my dad, and have that connection. And then following him, when him and Mom, after they retired, started going to all the festivals, like, wow, they're going to Maui, we should go to that one. And then later, after I had my son, we got to, you know, I would try to make a point to let my son follow his papa around and see what his papa does, and hoping that he would pick up a lot of that stuff.
And I think he did. So Hayden, if you want to share a little bit about your papa and your time with him.
So yeah, like Mama was saying, they traveled across the state, went to all the different islands, festivals, presentations, workshops, stuff like that. And most of the times we were able to go, me and Mom were able to tag along, whether it was off island or on island, like coming to Amy Greenwell Botanical Garden or things like that. But like any other kid, I never paid attention. I was in the back in the car on my iPad watching a movie while everybody else is outside ku'ikalo or making boards and stones. I never really found that passion or found that reason to do it. It was just a time where I had to tag along on another family trip that I didn't want to be on. I had to go to Kona for the weekend rather than staying home watching my favorite shows. But over the years of following and watching my papa through all his different workshops and presentations and stuff like that, it started off slowly. Oh, Hayden, go grab the poi board out of the truck, or go grab this, or go grab that. Oh, and since you're here, go refill my water. And since you're here, how about you go clean this kalo? And slowly, my papa started to give me more kuleana until next thing you know, it was on Amy Greenwell Girl Hawaiian Festival. I'm this 10-year-old kid and I'm teaching adults how to ku'ikalo. And I'm like, how did this happen? Because I still wanted to be back playing with my friends, running around, playing tag or whatever they were doing. But it was that, and then like Mom said, for her professors in college, that started to happen to me in school too. I would be in school and my teacher would be like, hey, you're Jerry, on the first day, Konanui, I know that name, how do I know that name? And I go, do you know anything about Carlo? And they go, oh yeah. And I go, yeah, that's my papa, the Carlo guy. So yeah, that's kind of been just really following and helping to take on the kuleana of learning. And then over the years of me being by my papa's side doing all the Carlo stuff, I've met so many of my his haumana, and like Mom calls them his other kids. He kind of adopted them into the Carlo life. So they've grown to be some of my closest and strongest uncles and aunties that I can go to for help. And for me, like I said, I never wanted to be out in the mala with my papa. But now after that he passed and I never fully had that chance to be out there with him, I can go to all his other kids and say, hey, my papa taught you about this, can you teach me now? And as I get more and more mature, I guess, and ready to take on more kuleana, it's really awesome to see the network that my papa provided or created, both on island and out of state, because now I traveled to Kauai right at the beginning of COVID, and I was able to just say, hey, I'm coming to Kauai, can we find some activities? And all my Kauai Ohana that my papa created was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go to this farm, we're gonna go visit this place, we're gonna go to this lo'i, and whatever. And it's like, it was a cultural experience for me, and I'm really glad about I'm happy that I have this network now that my papa passed down to me, and now it's about carrying on his kuleana, his legacy to Kalo, but then also helping my Ohana, so all my cousins, all his other grandkids to follow in Papa's footsteps as well.
And I think based upon, this common thread through what you all share is that Uncle Jerry wasn't necessarily just this kalo master that everyone sees him at, but was very involved in all kinds of things related to Aina and Kaya, whether it be ranching kuleana, farming kuleana, going down Lawai'a. It was a very well-rounded person. Like Auntie Gladys shared, he had his professional career, but what we're focusing on is what he's left behind, that legacy of teaching, even though we didn't know we were being taught, and making sure that the practices that he found so important that sustain the way we live here in Hawaii continue to live on. So really want to mahalo you folks for sharing a little bit about his personal life and who he was. So lovely to hear that you folks knew each other from grade school, Auntie.
From kindergarten to
Uncle Jerry passed on traditions of his own ohana. How do you ensure those traditions live on?
Uncle Jerry reminded me that learning about kalo is a continuous thing, and it's our kuleana to share whatever we've learned.
He liked to say to especially groups of people who have so many questions, he would say, don't be picky, don't be choosy, because size is not the issue, because you can only eat one spoon of poi at a time.
People often say that a mahi'ai is just a farmer, but Uncle Jerry taught that to be a mahi'ai, you have to be almost an expert at the universe. Can you share a little bit, the two of you share a little bit about what that mana'o means?
I guess, yeah. It's the famous saying he says, yeah, you have to know the universe of mahi'ai. He always quotes like you have to be a water specialist, a scientist, an archaeologist, all of these things that a mahi'ai doesn't get credit for, right? I also, I guess to touch on that question, you have names out there like Kealoha Domingo, you have names like Duffy Chang, you have Josh Fukuono, you have, the list goes on. You have people, Namea Hoshino, you have all these people that specialize in all these different things. And yes, they're mahi'ais. You know what I mean? Some of them advance in some, but then to me, what the uniqueness of that is that they know their intention. in growing that kalo, in loving that kalo, in every walk that it takes to nurture that kalo. So like my own relationship, I don't know NPK. I don't know nitrogen, what it does. I do know that my kalo's telling me it needs something. I know he's talking to me, he's raising his hand. And from there, I just like, I go over there and I give it something, you know. You can't teach that, you know what I mean? You have to kilo that, you have to learn that, and you have to just like see what happens, I guess. So yeah, to know the whole universe of Mahi'ai. It's hard to answer that question of what is the extent of that universe. I think that's why he used the word universe, right? Yeah.
Quite broad.
Yeah, it's you have to broaden your whole being just to be a Mahi'ai. You don't have to be just a soil expert. You don't have to know a certain plant. You just gotta be like, sometimes I know, I can quote him again. He says, many generations of planting kalo. This generation, the next generation might have missed something, but they had more, maybe abundance. And then the next generation, but I think it's just, I think that's what he meant by the universe of a Mahi'ai.
Kaiana?
Yeah, for me, that saying is so important today in how we value Mahi'ai. I think the kind of Western notion of what a farmer is doesn't relate to what a Mahi'ai is. They're separate concepts. And a Mahi'ai has to be a master of all of those areas because we increase our efficiency. As a Mahi'ai, we cannot waste time, right? We got to get everything to a state of uluvehi and of production to a point where we still have our leisure time with our ohana, right? We still need to be able to spend time with our keiki and our haumana. So knowing that universe around us allows us to increase our production and decrease the amount of time we spend growing food. And so, for example, we have to know tides. We have to know tides because it tells us when is a good time to cut our grass. We have to know moon phases. We have to know how to predict weather, right? We have to be able to know when the rains are coming, when to kanu. We have to know all of these different aspects around us. And something that I really love that Uncle Jerry used to always say was that while modern science is great, our ike kupuna is almost unmatched because they weren't constrained by the two big constraints that science has today, which is time and money. Time and money, those two things combined, our kupuna weren't held to those. And so if it took 14 generations to learn that this kalo variety grew best right here by the kai, and this one grew best in the desert, and this one grew best with the makani, that's what it took. And my kai, that's what it took. And so when we talk about ike kupuna, it's well tested and well proved. We can trust it and we can know that it works, and it does save time as a Mahi'ai. Something else that I was thinking of this universe is kilo. Uncle Jerry was a master. He was a mauliau honua. He was a multi-generational knowledge who received it down and was observing everything always. I remember one time I was on the papa with him on the other side, and my daughter walked up and tried to take some of the ai off my papa. And I said, hey, don't touch the ai, because some of my kumu before, Anakala Jerry said, the ai was kapu until it was off. And Anakala Jerry stopped me and he said, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, come, my. He brings my daughter and he gives her some of my ai. And he said, you want to make sure that you spark the fire in them young so that they want to come back and they want to sit on the board with you. And to me, it shook my world up that I wasn't even observing that, I was chasing, my daughter away, but he was just great at showing the aloha and being very observant and knowing that the whole universe around haloa and kalo was more important than a previous protocol that I might have been taught.
And for you folks, I mean, whether it's something you're learning new or changing a perspective that you had previously learned, how did he go about teaching, especially going back to this question of the universe, right? the universe is a big thing to try and teach. So how did Uncle Jerry go about teaching you folks to be like that or to think like that?
Many ways. I mean, it can go as far as black and white, I guess you would say. He would just look at you and tell you, what you think? What you think that Kalo? You know, or he could throw Palu sometimes, which was well known, and he could tell you, I think that Kalo, wrong one you planted on here. You know, maybe you should have planted somebody else over there. So he might have been testing you. Your answer shouldn't have been black and white. You know, so I guess that style was, he left it up to interpretation and made sure you were never discouraged. You know, you weren't wrong. You were just like being taught. But if you want the correct answer, then you ask me. And us, we would not ask for the correct answer. You know, we would make sure we achieve what he was set out to teach us. Yeah, unique teaching, I think, is hard to broaden. Once again, it was a universe style of teaching.
Yeah, what was great about his teaching methods too is he could take something as complex as the universe, as complex as the scientific breakdown of a variety of kalo, and give it to you simply too, right? So he had that ability to take these complex topics and spoon feed them if he needed to. But like he said, emphasizing the palu, Uncle Jerry was the master fisherman. He was the master lavaia. He threw palu everywhere he went. Little bits and pieces of bait, and people would bite. You know, all of us bit at one point, right?
Still get hook marks.
You're still pulling out the hook. So that was the key, is just throwing out a little bit of palu and making sure we can handle the palu before we eat more. And it was cool because those who were ready to ai could eat more, and those who just wanted a little palu was maikai too.
Perhaps you can explain, Kaiana, a little bit more about that mana'o of palu for those joining us in Under the Kona Moon, what that means, at least in Uncle Jerry's case.
Yeah, so palu in the sense we're talking about is not its literal sense of bait, but it's little bits of things that intrigue the mind, right? Like he said, the hook, yeah? It's things that he throws out there just to get you hooked. Because when Uncle Jerry was going around, there was interest in kalo, but you definitely saw it grow exponentially during his lifetime, a lot of it from what he did too. And that's because of his ability to hook people into the world of a mahi'ai and into kalo varieties and into ku'i kalo, into kalai, like kiahi, awamozak kuleana. And so, I would say that it's just little pieces of ono information or stories that you bite to and you learn more.
And I think this kind of speaks to Imaika Ike Kalo Ika Ohaya, and being that Uncle Jerry is no longer with us physically as Oha, you folks as Hamana, you can tell that Uncle Jerry was awesome, and the way he went about things and the Ike he had, and he was this halau of Ike, right? That lives on through all of you. So really thankful to kind of hear some of those tidbits of palu that you're sharing with us about what your experiences were with him. Anything else you want to share about Uncle? I know you could go on for days, but
yeah.
you know this.
Yeah. Wait till you get the aval.
Yeah.
Then the stories will come.
But yeah, just anything else around the universe and just the universe of Kalo, I guess.
I guess with the palu, Kayana was broad when he said about the palu. He was hooking. He was hooking you for that ena, that ono, to learn more. But I guess the more intimate you got with him and the more you were around him, that palu was more kolohe.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't blame the kalo. It's not the kalo's fault. Blame the farmer.
Whether it's planting, prepping omala, taking care of your ohana, whatever you do, do it all with intention.
So, what was one of the most valuable lessons that you learned from Uncle Jerry Konanui?
I think it started off when I attended one of his first workshops. There was this connection with kalo that he's tried to explain to everybody, and it dealt with if anyone wants to connect with kalo, then it goes beyond just taking a huli and putting it in the ground and watching it grow. There was an explanation which he provided that says that we should go beyond that, to learn, to study it, learn the ike behind it, and create a pathway where the ike from the past continues into the future. And I think that's one of the things that really sit pretty hard in my head.
And is that, in one of our other talk stories with another haumana, they mentioned halu, and it's just that little glimpse of information, right, that gets you more interested. How did your learning with Uncle Jerry proceed after that?
That's an interesting one because it never seemed like he gave me the total answer from the beginning. He would just kind of feed me some information and then go from there. And for me, I didn't realize it until some years later that he was actually answering the question, but he was answering it in a way that kind of fed it to me, where I had to come up with it myself.
And I would see how that could be, the valuable part of the way he taught you, right? And
oh, sure.
Is there anything else, that has stuck with you in the time that you learned with him?
There was one more time, I recall a different workshop, this was years ago, and he was talking about the connection. Once you start to grow kalo, there's a connection that you start to recognize. And it could be a subtle movement of a leaf. It could be passing another variety of kalo, and it actually dumps a little bit of water on you, kind of to give you that little signal of a connection. And then while he was talking about that, just out of the blue, he says that it could be something completely different. It could actually be an eel flying overhead. And I remembered that exact day because the moment he said that, sure enough, an eel flew overhead. And I've remembered that from day one. It left an impression in my brain.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like for Uncle Jerry, while he was focused on being practical at times, very, very, very in tune to those small ho'ailona that appear every day if we're aware. Not that we're looking for it, but just aware, So, Nick, for you, what are some of the valuable lessons that you learned or that Uncle taught you in your time with him?
Well, I mean, a lot of the things that Uncle Manuel said, I completely agree with. He was such a spiritual man to me, and he was really guided by values, and those values came from his tight-knit Ohana, and just growing up in Puna and the way the lifestyle was at that time, in Opihikau, and he lived aloha, like he gave from his heart continuously. He practiced the values of ho'ihi, respect, ha'a, he was humble at all times, and he truly understood his kuleana. And just like was said earlier, there's an olelo no'eau that I feel he embodies, and it's oi ka'aka'a nā maka. It means while the eyes are still open. And it was advice given to the youth to gather and learn the ike of the kupuna before their eyes close and when they hala or they go moe. So I feel like he truly understood that kuleana, like to his core, and it was his life's mission to gather and learn and to freely share, But he was so humble that if you were to come and ask him, he would always say things like, oh, in my limited knowledge and experience, or in Puna, this is the way I've noticed that it happens, but every place is different. He was so humble, that
Ohe pau ka ike ika halau ho'okahi. You know, there's more than one way. Not all knowledge is in one school of thought. And those are things that I learned from him, that, you know, he never said he knew it all. You know, he was just so humble, and he was always willing to have a dialogue and like cultivate that relationship, you know, with Haloa, with you. You know, he was a true mahiai. He was cultivating not just kalo, not just ava, not just all the other mea kanu that he planted, but he was cultivating people and to love and want to learn more and to develop relationships. You know, so yeah, he's had a tremendous impact on me and who I want to be. You know,
and the way he went about, I think, that mana'o of a'ole pauka ike ka halau ho'okahi is, as much as you folks were able to learn from him, right, there's more to be learned even though he's not with us today. And those halau can be the lo'i themselves, right, where they are teaching you, because he also taught the importance of being aware when you're outside and when you're in the elements, and that those are the halau. The halau are everywhere around us, and I think that's perhaps something he taught, right?
Exactly. You know, like people, I remember I was just getting started planting. At that time I lived in Leilani in Kahialaka, and I was like, oh, Uncle, which variety should I plant? And he's like, oh, I don't know, let me know. You know, it's just, you know, you're not ready for that. But the reality is he's like, you know, I don't know, I never grew in that specific area or to the extent in which you did. So go and try and experiment and find out. And that is very much the practice of our kupuna was, you know, there is no right way. There's only try or try not, you know, and you just try and be resourceful. And he was all of those things.
Uncle Manuel, you have any other experiences you'd like to share about Uncle Jerry?
He somehow had that knowledge, that knack with people. He understood the difference between different types of people and what their strengths were. For me, I was more of a cultivator, a collector, and a distributor of kalo. And he understood that, and he helped me along to focus in on that sort of thing. Other haumana, he realized that they were better at perhaps identifying, sharing their ike with the mo'olelo behind kalo, but he was really a people person, and he focused in on that sort of thing.
I think that's wonderful, right? Where those are the best kinds of pomo that we can ask for, who identify and nurture in their haumana their strengths. And you know, not all of us can be masters, right? In a sense, but we can be masters in one mahele or one part of the process or the kuleana to ensure that kalo lives on and continues to sustain our communities across Hawaii. And I think that's exactly what Uncle was and what he did for all of you as his haumana. So I want to open it up, Nick, if you have anything else you'd like to share.
Just that Uncle Jerry was aloha. Like, he lived it, he breathed it. It was who he was inside. There was no faking it. That's who he was, and he was just so humble. I remember one time after we were sitting on his lanai and talking, and I said, Uncle, thank you so much, you know, for being my kumu. And he's like, oh wait, man. I was like, oh, I thought I said something wrong. And he's like, I am not your kumu. You know, he's like, I'm not your kumu, I'm your friend, and I can learn just as much from you as you can learn from me. And that to me just strikes me as a man who is considered by many to be a loea, a master of mahiai and of kalo, and to have that humility and be like, no, I can still learn from you no matter what. And that to me is something that will always stick with me, is remaining humble and knowing that you don't know everything. Everybody has different perspectives, and we can learn from each other.
And I think how fitting that you spoke about the io, because and that idea of you speaking of the io and you about that sharing back and forth of knowledge as we see two io fly above us right now. And that's Uncle, you know, validating for you folks probably that you folks are on that path that you wanted and continuing the good work. So
And expanding on Nick's thing too, I recall once Jerry, I made mention to Uncle Jerry too that he was the teacher. I'm still learning. And he stressed to me that, don't worry, Manuel, I'm still learning too. So it was a reinforcement that we're all still learning. Hamana or kumu, it just goes on like that. And I recall once Uncle Jerry saying that he was not the teacher, that Haloa was the teacher. Very poignant.
Yeah,
remember that too.
All kind of heavy hitter, short little ikeya that he was able to pass on to you folks. So mahalo for sharing about.
Thank you.
My kuleana is to connect those who have the ike to those who want to pick it up.
We're all links in a chain going all the way back to Haloa. And our kuleana is to learn all the ike we can and freely pass it to the next generations.
We collect, cultivate, and share all the varieties of kupuna kalo while keeping in mind that the best variety of kalo is the one in your bowl on your table.
All right, and mahalo to the two of you, for having us here at your aina at Honokohau Kona. We appreciate it, and being around your work, puts that mana and that intention into what we're able to discuss today. So for you, Uncle Jerry was known for his humility and his unique style of teaching. What was your experience as his haumana?
Oh, mahalo. Well, I think firstly, I feel so fortunate to be able to have learned from Uncle Jerry. And for myself, I spent the most time with him, I think, in the mala, observing different kalo. And some things that stick with me that I learned from him was, he would say, you have to vehe yourself. You have to open yourself before you walk into the mala. Any mala, get rid of any bad feelings you have or any egos you might bring with you, and be ready to go into the kalo's world and listen to the kalo and learn from the kalo. And even from a ways away from the mala before we enter, he would be like, "Whoo, look at those guys. They're all ku'e, standing straight up, growing straight up." And then he would look at somebody else and say, "Look at that ohana, they're moku moku," or their stance is real, solid to the ground. And then we would get into the mala, and his excitement was so contagious. You couldn't help but get excited with him, and that really started to just pull me in as a haumana and get excited about the varieties as well. And he would point out, like, look at these lau are so ovate, or look at the other lau, sagittate, and look at this lihi, this color, these brilliant colors and different characteristics that you would see of the different varieties in the mala. And not only the Hawaiian understanding of it, or the ike kupuna of the stance, the ku'e or the moku moku, but also some of the botany terms that he would use too, like the shape of the leaves and other things like that.
Just a lot of ike, both in the ike ku'una Hawaii and the ike ku'una of modern science. But I think for you, already knowing you and being an observational type person, Uncle really was able to feed that in you, especially in this realm, it seems.
Yes, I think I learned so much from just watching and listening to him, and learning how to be with kalo, how to learn from kalo. He would also share, like, you gotta share your aloha with the kalo. You gotta love your kalo and feed them good stuff so he produced good for you. You have to go in there and listen to them and pay attention to what they need. They're gonna tell you what they want. They're gonna tell you what they need. They're gonna tell you who they are. I feel like he really encouraged people to fall in love with the kalo, to see all of these wonderful things and characteristics that he saw. And that was just really his love for the kalo. He was like a kid in a candy store, in a collection patch or in a big mala, and Auntie Gladys was right there with him, and it was exciting. And fun.
Oh,
It was lots of fun.
And Uncle Kiahi, for you, in that unique style of teaching, how do you recall what that experience was like as a Homana?
I think it's that same manao of that palu, that snare, that hook that got you hooked on kalo, yeah. And then I think like I shared the kolohe side of it. And I guess to touch on that, one story I had, and this is a while back, and it's his unique style of teaching, but it also showed the other part of palu. So like I relocated in Kona to this area in Kalawa, and then we've been around Uncle, we was around him, so we always had him as our back pocket, our bulletin 84, our out, our way to ask. So I asked Uncle, and I said, Uncle, I moved down this side in Kona. What grow good over there? And he looked at me like with that little mischievous look, that koloi look, and he said, why are you asking me? I'm from Puna. Why you no ask Kona? So I caught the palu. I got excited, but I kind of took that manao and I went with it, and I asked people of Kona. I asked a certain Ohana. I asked, there's so much you can name. I went out and asked people for their ike and what grows good at their place. They didn't live in Kalawa. They live in Kona, Kona. It's huge. So what I did is I asked all these people, and they gave me the varieties, and I took a couple of those huli that they told me, verbally told me, and I went and colored it. And this was like 8 months later, and Uncle came to our house. We had a kalai jam or something, and then he never even bothered to look the kalo. He even asked me, he said, so okay, what Kona told you? And I said, oh, Uncle Clarence Madera said they grew this, or Uncle guys told me they grew this, and they do this, and he looked at me, doing good. He goes, he gave that unique, So you never asked Kona yet. And right there I knew, I found out that palu, and I like I said, I get the hook knock, right? And the manao was that I was supposed to grow that kalo. I was supposed to grow, and the aina supposed to tell me what can grow here. So like that's like they said, he taught in a unique style, and it was like you either gonna get hooked or you're gonna fail. And Uncle was not gonna discourage anybody, so he gave me that chance, and I kind of rode with it wrong. And that's what I mean by unique style. It's just, you gotta be on guard with Uncle, because once he knows you comfortable, once he knows you ono, once he knows he got you hooked, then he gonna kolohe you. He gonna play with you because he like you get better. He don't like just teach you, oh, Monday through Friday on this moon you go plant this. He might throw you on curveball, and he might tell you, no more moon, no better go plant. You know what I mean? He might show you that stuff, and that's, to me, that was his, I guess, his way of taking care of the lahui, but also making the lahui work as well.
And that's what masterful teachers do, right? Equip you enough for you to practice, but also to learn on your own. And it seems that it's worked because you folks as Homana continue to learn on your own, even after Uncle Jerry's passing, right? And from those kumu that are all around us, from Kona or whatever aina you live in, they continue to be your kumu. So with that, any other valuable tidbits that Uncle shared with you?
I think another thing that I remember learning from Uncle too was in the mala again, and I asked about a certain variety of kalo, saying, oh, Uncle, I heard it called this by so-and-so or something, and then, in the bulletin it's this, or what is the correct name for that? He said, oh, it depends where you go, depends whose mala you're in. Like, don't ever take any negative to anybody else's mala. They work so hard. They work so hard in there to do whatever they can, and you call them what they call them. That's all right. It doesn't matter. If they ask you, then you can share, but you better know why, if you're sharing. But always open to being a learner wherever he went to, I think is so important. And looking forward to learning from everybody and their different styles and what works for them, and then asking, well, why did you do it that way, or what was your intention when you did it like that? But just holding such a high regard for every other mahi'ai or, person that was interested in kalo and trying their best and wanting to learn more. And he would even come to the garden where I was working at Amy Greenwell and be like, oh, ask Kamuela what to do because she's the po'o of this place. And I would be like, oh my gosh, Uncle Jerry's here. Like, I'm no po'o at all, little bit pressure. But it was just that respect that he had for places that he went to and other people that were in charge of those malas.
Humility and openness, right? I think it's something that I hear through a lot of what you folks are sharing, and it's you go to learn and be humble because we always have the opportunity to learn, especially when we are in somebody else's aina, right? So, Uncle Keahi, if you have anything else.
Yeah, same humility. In a sense, to me, it tells that no forget, give me that respect back, because in no place, we already know that, in no place we're going to go to anybody's place and say, Uncle Jerry said this.
Right.
And I think that's why he instilled that us most of all, because I believe we are a reflection of him, and I believe that that's why he instilled that in us too. It's never go to somebody, another kumu of a certain place, or even a ohana of this place or anything, and never ever use his name in that. I think he wanted to instill that as well, because he walked that path. Make sure we walk that path. To me, that's the more important lesson I think he was trying to teach as well. Because like he said, ike kupuna, it's in your DNA, it's in you, but it doesn't necessarily say that you know that guy's DNA. That guy's ike kupuna at the place and time. So I think, no throw his name out like that. Period. You know what I mean? But because he did the same, I think that's what kind of,
I think at the same time too, he also really created this network for all of us of relationships, of people, not only from this moku, but from, the whole Pai'aina, that, well, for me, I would have probably never met these other mahi'ai or people that love kalo as much as we do, and shared his ohana with us as well too, and that we're able to carry on those relationships now.
Wonderful. Well, mahalo again, you folks, for sharing about those times you had with Uncle Jerry. And
my kuleana is to be a lifelong learner. No matter what I do, halua or not, I'm always going to be learning from my papa.
Kona moon, shining so bright, smiling at you, right out of the sky.
Under the Kona Moon is brought to you in part by La'iopua 2020 and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
The preceding program was a production of Naleo TV.